Okay, now the face is the part of the body which extends from this hairline up to the chin and inferior border of the mandible and from one ear to another ear. But in Islam, the face extends from the hairline up to the Adam's apple, that is, to this cartilage. That's why while making wuzu for namaz, you have to wash this inferior surface of the mandible as well. Okay. Now the skin of the face you can see is partially hairy and partially non-hairy, and more hairy in some people and less hairy in some people. And then the subcutaneous fats is more in some area. For example, in cheek area, in this area, the subcutaneous fat is more, while it is very less in the eyelids. And then the superficial fascia that is deep to the skin, there are muscles which are called as muscles of facial expression. While there is no deep fascia in the face, and the muscles which are the muscles of facial expression is unique, that these muscles are being attached to the deep surface or to the dermis of the skin. And the muscles attached to the skin, they are called as panniculus carnosus. And you know, one muscle over here deep to the skin and lying in the superficial fascia, or between the skin and the deep fascia in the neck, is platysma muscle. Then one muscle over here is present palmaris brevis muscle. Then other panniculus carnosus are the skin muscles, are the muscles between the skin and the deep fascia in the human body, are not present but only present in the face area. And these muscles are the one hand attached either to the bone and the other hand attached to the deep surface of the skin. That's why if there is wound in the skin, cut wound, it gaps because of the contraction of the muscles. And it is for the same reason, if any of the muscle gets paralyzed, for example, in facial palsy, the face is being deviated or the oral cavity is being deviated to one side. Alright, the skin muscles or the pannicular carnosus muscle are well developed in the animal, and in the animals it is being present throughout all the body. That's why you would have seen animals that they can shrink the skin upon itself. If, for example, something comes to touch the skin, then the animal can shrink the skin, while the human cannot shrink the skin upon itself. In the same way, in the dogs, you would have seen that the dogs can move the ears front and back because the muscles over here are well developed, but in the human being, not well developed. That's why the human being can't move the ears. But in the face, the muscles are being attached to the skin. That's why the human can close the eyes and open the eyes, close the mouth and open the mouth, dilate the nasal cavity to become or make it narrow, and that's why this facial the appearance is being changed. Now the main action of this facial muscle is to protect or to guard around the oral cavity, around the nasal cavity, and around the palpebral fissure, around the orbit, and in the same way helping in the chewing and swallowing the food. But at the same time, with the help of the facial muscles, you can produce a very meaningful expression. Or even if you meet with one another first time, just by the facial expression you can judge one another personality. That's why these muscles are also called a muscle of facial expression, while the people say that the facial expression is actually the byproduct or the side effect of the action of the muscles, while the main action is to guard around the oral and the nasal and the palpebral orifices. Okay, now the muscles of the face, that's why it is said it extends from this hairline up to this chin and inferior border of the mandible. All these muscles, these are called as muscles of facial expression. And note the point that the muscles of the facial expression are all being supplied by the facial nerve. Facial expression, facial nerve. Its motor supply is from the facial nerve, while its proprioceptive supply, proprioceptive innervation is from the trigeminal nerve. Proprioception means the sense of position of the muscle or a joint. That's why each fraction of a second our mind knows about the state of contraction or position of the oral cavity or the nasal cavity or the eyes. That's why even without thinking, your eyes and your mouth or your any other part of the body do not remain in a normal condition, because each fraction your mind knows about it. That is proprioception. Proprioceptive supply of these facial muscle, that is from the trigeminal nerve, while the skin of the face is also being supplied by the three division of the trigeminal nerve. While the skin of the face by the trigeminal nerve, while the muscle deep to it by the facial nerve, facial muscle by the facial nerve. And the sensory or proprioceptive supply of the muscle is from the trigeminal nerve, and while the muscle of mastication are also supplied from the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, now we come to the muscles. First, we come to the muscles of the eye. To the muscles of the eye, or we call it as palpebral fissure, or you can see over here, this is the orbit. Now, first of all, over here, the constrictor muscles of the orbit, the constrictor muscle of the palpebral fissure, that is to close the eyes, and then to dilate the eye or palpebral fissure to open it. Now the constrictor muscle is the orbicularis oculi. This muscle, orbicularis oculi. This is the constrictor muscle of the eye. Okay, you can see it over here. Look, this muscle, this one, this is the orbicularis oculi, and you can see it over here. This one, and this hole. This is the orbicularis oculi. This is the constrictor or closing of the palpebral fissure. The palpebral fissure is the fissure between the two eyelids. Then the dilator muscle is number one. You can see this muscle, the frontal belly of the occipitofrontalis muscle, which is attached to it. This is the dilator. And second is the corrugator supercilii muscle. And the third one is the levator palpebrae superioris. Okay, first we discuss. So in this way, the muscle around the orbit are the orbicularis oculi, the frontal belly of occipitofrontalis, the corrugator supercilii, and the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. Okay, so first we discuss this orbicularis oculi. Look, this is the upper eyelid, and this is the lower eyelid, and this is the fissure between the two. And this you can see, this is the margin of the orbit, and you can see some muscle even extend above the margin of the orbit above and below the margin of the orbit, while some part of the muscle lies in the upper eyelid and in the lower eyelid. In this way, orbicularis oculi consists of this part which lies in the upper and lower eyelid. This is called as palpebral part of orbicularis oculi, and this part which is called as orbital part of orbicularis oculi, while one part lying deep, that is called as lacrimal part. In this way, the orbicularis oculi muscle consists of three parts: this one palpebral part, this one orbital part, and the deeper one lacrimal part. Now this palpebral part over here at the medial angle of the eye, there is a ligament like this, which is called as medial, like this, lying over here, which is called as medial palpebral ligament. So this palpebral part medially originate from the medial palpebral ligament, and this one also from the medial palpebral ligament, and laterally what happens that the two fibers, they interdigitate with one another like this, and they form a raphe over here, no bony attachment, but a raphe is being formed over here, which is called as lateral palpebral raphe. Raphe, if you remember from the first year, it is the interdigitation of the muscle fibers over there, and somewhere it is used for insertion of the muscles. In the same way, this palpebral muscle originates from the medial palpebral ligament and then being unite with one another, and the lateral palpebral raphe or insertion is over here. Now, the palpebral part over here, you can see this is the orbital part. This one, this is very big. It originates, you can see, look, this is the frontal bone, this is frontal part of this is maxillary part of the frontal bone, this is the maxilla, and this is the frontal part of the maxilla. So this originate from this maxillary part of the frontal bone and frontal part of the maxilla and from the lacrimal crest, and then wrap around like this, okay, and they also again unite in the lateral palpebral raphe. Well, the deeper part, look over here, look in this fossa, in this fossa lies the lacrimal sac, which is full of lacrimal fluid. So small part of this orbicularis oculi originate from this lacrimal crest, and some fiber directly attached to the lacrimal sacs, and then it merges with the other palpebral part. Okay, now supplied by the fascial nerve. Look, when this palpebral part contract, it closes the eyelids, but gently, as in sleeping. The eyelashes are not being buried. It is in gentle closure as in sleeping. Okay. And that is being done continuously also without thinking, that blinking, in which the eyelids are being closed for a while just to spread the lacrimal fluid over the conjunctiva and over the eyeball, to make it moist, to keep it moist. Otherwise, if, for example, if there is facial palsy and the eyelid cannot be closed, what happens? There is dry eye. That's why we put natural tear continuously into that eye. Otherwise, there is danger of ulceration. So this palpebral part, when contract, it causes gentle closure, while this orbital part, when contracts, it causes forceful closure of the eyelid, in which the eyelashes are being buried. Forceful closure in which the eyelashes are being buried, while by the palpebral part, in which gentle closure, the eyelashes are being not buried. Eyelashes you can see, while the lacrimal part compress over the lacrimal sac to push the lacrimal fluid forward through the nasolacrimal duct into the nasal cavity. This is the orbicularis oculi. Now, this frontal part of occipitofrontalis, this is frontal belly and that is occipital belly, and in between this you will study in the head and neck. But Only point that it being attached over here, when it contracts, it elevates the upper eyelid for opening the eye. Okay, and then another important muscle is the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. Note one point, levator palpebrae superioris muscle is a muscle which originates, look, this is the lesser vingus sphenoid bone. It originates from this lesser vingus sphenoid bone, comes forward and divided into two slits, and these two slits are being attached. Let me say this is the upper eyelid. It is being attached to this upper eyelid. And note the point that the levator palpebrae superioris muscle is unique by the fact that some part of it is smooth muscle and some part of it is the skeletal. The smooth muscle part of the levator palpebrae superioris is being supplied by the sympathetic fibers which come from the superior cervical ganglion, while the central connection is at T1 level of the spinal cord. Fiber from T1 level ascend upward into the superior cervical ganglion. From the superior cervical ganglion, the fibers reach into the skull along with carotid arteries, and then they travel into the orbit and passes through the ciliary ganglion but without relay, without synapse, and reaches to the smooth muscle part of levator palpebrae superioris muscle. That's why if there is a lesion at the T1 level of the spinal cord, or if there is any tumor compressing over the T1 nerve, there will be drooping of the eyelid. The eyelid will droop downward, and that is being called as Horner syndrome. But the skeletal muscle part of the levator palpebrae superioris is being supplied by the oculomotor nerve, by the somatic nerve. But and then if both the part are being damaged, and then the whole muscle get a condition in which the letters or lifters of the upper eyelid are being paralyzed, the upper eyelid then droops completely, and the patient want to see, it elevates the upper eyelid like this with the hand. That is being called myasthenia gravis, and then it is being treated with the neostigmine or pyridostigmine. And okay, you can treat it with that. If God Allah kare, there should be no other disease, for example the T1 level tumor or something else. Simple myasthenia gravis is being treated with the neostigmine. Okay, this is all about the muscles of the eye or orbit. Now secondly, you come to the nose, and you look, nose, this part of the nose is being called as ella of the nose, and this is called as bridge of the nose. And you can see one muscle, it passes across transversely across the bridge of the nose, and this is being called as compressor part of the nasalis muscle. This is nasalis muscle, and this is transverse or compressor part, that is being called as compressor nasi. This is compressor nasi. Compressor nasi is the transverse part of the nasalis muscle which stretches across the nose, one side and another side, and they help, and they help in closing. Then the other muscle part, this one you can see, look, which is being attached to the ella of the nose, that is being called as ellar part of the nasalis muscle. And this ellar part of the nasalis muscle, it elevates the nose and the ella, and helps in dilatation of the nasal cavity to elevate the ella. And in addition to that, there are some other muscles. For example, levator labii superioris, okay, and depressor septi, which depresses the septum, and levator labii superioris, okay. This also helps in the depression of the nasal bone. And need not to discuss or to remember the origins of the small muscles. Anyhow, the muscles around the nose are depressor septi, levator labii superioris, alar part of the nasellus and transverse part of the nasellus muscle. Okay, this for today it is sufficient for then the muscles around the oral cavity and some part of the cheek. Then we will discuss in the next lecture, and you inshallah will discuss in the lecture. Okay, thank you.